Christina, who's up in Boise and trying to stay safe because there's a lot of smoke in the air up there, just like there is down here in LA.
Forgive my voice. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Christina did not have 5 cigarettes before she got on the podcast today. She's
only
just up
4.
in Boise.
Only 4.
Only 4.
Yeah.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Yeah.
And just in case you're watching the replay, either on Facebook, YouTube, on the podcast, we're coming to you here in September of 2020, which is when the world just seems on fire in so many ways.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll dig into that a little bit because your expertise is publicity, right? And all about getting your name and your brand and everything out there. And by the way, if you're watching on Facebook, I see a few of you are already watching live. You know what to do. Do me just a huge favor. Click the little likey button, leave a comment, do something there so that the other people in the audience, the Facebook algorithm takes over and shows more people this, or share it if you know somebody that needs some publicity. Christina, let's just jump right in. First of all, what is publicity?
Great question. This is kind of the first thing I love to talk about because sometimes when I hop on a call with people, I'm like, okay, so what do you think publicity is? And I don't say that to seem holier than thou, like, well, I know what it is and you clearly don't know what it is. But the reason that I do that is because people's answers are so across the board. So I get people that are like, press releases, then other people that are like a thing they do on Mad Men, not quite sure. But most of the time it's a lot of, I don't really know. I know it's important, but I'm not quite sure what it is. So I'm going to take a minute here and just kind of break it down really quick for people. All of your marketing is going to fall under 3 categories: owned, earned, and paid. Now, this may be very elementary for a lot of people, but this is kind of where publicity comes into that. So paid media is, shocker, things that you've paid for. So that might be social media ads. Maybe that's even, based on what you do, an influencer campaign where money was exchanged, that type of thing. Then there's also owned media. So that's the things you own: your website, your e-newsletter, your social media channels, the things that you have control over. And then what I focused on and what publicity is that earned piece. So it means that it's coming from a third-party source. So not your own website, not your own social media. And it is unpaid. So you haven't paid for publicity. It's something that you've done the work, they're interested in what you have to say, and you earn that coverage. Kind of to break it down a little, or to give an example. So until way later than a person should think this, I thought that award shows were like, someone just recognized a great job you'd done, and they were like, here's an award, you've done it. We all noticed, and it's great. And, up until I was like in my 30s, for sure, I thought that that's how it worked. And then I realized, you apply to win an award, you're judged based on that application, and then they decide who they're going to give it to. And that's kind of a way to look at publicity. You're going to send in, your ideas, your pitch. You're going to send in your application, if you will. Someone's going to take a look at it, decide if you're the right fit, and then they award that with coverage, whether that's on a podcast, whether that's in a magazine, whatever that is. But that's kind of the way to look at it is most of the time the media is not coming to you, you are going to them.
So let's talk about this, right? Because obviously social media, that's all the buzz for the last 10 years. And it's like, all that other stuff is so old school. And, you can just go live on your phone and on your social media and you can go viral and you can get thousands or hundreds or thousands of millions of views. And, the percentage of people that can do that and build that audience is so small. Can you talk about why maybe some more traditional publicity still matters here in 2020, right? Because I was telling you before we went live on the call, if I go to somebody's website or I see somebody's, signature line or something, and it says as featured on TMZ, Channel 7 News, Forbes magazine, like that still kind of matters to me. And I don't know if that's 100%. Just because I'm getting old or if that still matters. So tell us why kind of that old school publicity, like having a press release and, being a guest on your local news channel and being the subject matter expert in the Pasadena Star magazine, being the realtor that's featured in that magazine because you have a little article. Tell me why that's still important and why people shouldn't just say, Scott and Christina are over the hill. It should be all social media all the time.
all the time. None of this publicity stuff. This is no. I will tell you the reason why, and that is that consumers believe what a third party says about someone. Okay, so if I get a feature, or if my local TV station calls me on to do a cooking segment, like I'm a fitness expert or something like that, that is all stuff that validates my expertise in the minds of the consumer. And that's why those as seen on and that type of things are so important. And it doesn't matter the size of the publication or the podcast or the anything that you're on. It just validates that that expert status is there, that you truly are an expert in what you talk about, and that visibility is there. I think it's something like, I want to say the Consumer Research Marketing Association, and I'm not exactly sure on the stat, but I do remember that it was about 70% of consumers prefer to learn about a business through like an article or a podcast as opposed to a traditional ad. Now, that doesn't mean that ads shouldn't be a part of your marketing. I want to be very clear on that. It just means that publicity should also be a part of your marketing, because a lot of times it gets pushed to the side in favor of, kind of some of the more, traditional or fast ways that we see people, getting maybe building up their lists and stuff like that. But with publicity, you're going to build your list up with warm leads, people that actually are interested in what you have to say. They're not coming on cold. They've already been introduced to you and they like something that you have to say.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've got a good friend of mine who he did just an insane amount of podcasts for the first 5 years that his book came out. And I don't think you would mind me using his name. Hal Elrod, he wrote a book called The Miracle Morning. And I think in 5 years, he went on 1,200 different podcasts. And, his thought was, at the end of the day, one of these podcasts are really going to catch fire and be a super big deal.
Yeah.
And sure enough, that's exactly what happened, right? 5 years later, Entrepreneur on Fire or whatever was one of the biggest podcasts. And then he could say, oh yeah, I was on the Entrepreneur on Fire podcast. And, I'm effectively endorsed with them. I was one of their first few shares. So give us, 5 or 6 channels where you're still pushing energy in kind of traditional publicity. I know podcast is obviously one of them, getting people interviewed, but can you talk about a few of the different channels?
Absolutely. Podcast right now is actually what I would say number one. Being a guest on podcasts, this is where marketing is heading. I know it's very meta to talk about being on podcasts when I'm on, something that's like a podcast, but this is because I believe in it. I've been on multiple podcasts because when I started my publicity, or I shouldn't say that, when I started my online entrepreneur journey after leaving a PR agency and having my daughter and being like, okay, I want to be able to set my own schedule, I created an online course. And that was about publicity for tourism, because that's what I focused on at my agency. And I did what the gurus told me to do. I put in a bunch of money to ads. I did all this ad work. I put money in, I did all this stuff, and it grew my list 100% for sure. But I wasn't even doing what I taught. So after I did that first launch, I was like, okay, hold up. Walk it back a step. Like, you need to be doing practice what you preach, right? Like, do what you do. So then I started to get myself booked on podcast. And that's when I saw that course take off. And the beautiful thing about podcasts is, even though I don't specifically work in tourism anymore, I focus on kind of more online based entrepreneurs. I still get sales from podcasts that I did a year and a half ago, because people binge podcasts. When they find one that they like, they're like, oh, I'm going to listen to like 10 of these. Like, they don't care that it was a year ago. They want to learn that information that they had. And this more than anyone, Scott, but once someone loves a host, they will follow they care about what that host has to say.
Right.
And so the thing that I always say to people is like, podcasts are the easiest, lowest barrier of entry for you to start getting some publicity right now. There are over 1 million shows listed between iTunes and Spotify. 1 million, which means that there are shows for every single niche, There are shows for every single person to find opportunities on. And so that's why and this is growing every single week. Even in the US alone, 25% of Americans listen to a podcast every week. That's 68 million people. So there are so many opportunities. People are putting these in their ears. They're going for a walk. They're listening to podcasts while they wash dishes. My husband and I, we just went on a trip this weekend, to get away for a couple of days. Of course, we're listening to a podcast on the way to our, destination, that type of thing. This is just where it's at right now for sure. So that's definitely something that I recommend, and it's free.
Right.
That's definitely something that I recommend.
And I don't know, real quick, just focus on podcasts because, so many of the people watching this are loan officers, realtors, business owners, they need people that can spend money. I remember reading something, and it's just, you have to go way back a decade or so, where it was like, hey, more affluent people were the more early adopters of the iPhone. The podcast really started with iTunes and through the iPhone. And then, of course, it spread to Stitcher and whatnot. But there's still this residual effect where that 25% of Americans that listen to podcasts tend to be the more affluent consumer who's going to buy your home, get your mortgage, go to hot yoga, spend $5 on a, gluten-free, non-GMO.
They're hitting the farmer's market. They're hitting the farmer's market for sure.
Yeah, they're hitting the farmer's market.
Yes. I think that is true about the athlete. And one thing that I think about highly successful people and why they love podcasts so much is they're trying to maximize their day. Right. So like one of my top 2 strength finders things is maximizer. I am like, okay, if I have to go do this, what else can I do at the exact same time? All right. Like I want to know what I can be doing all the time. And so for people, that's what I'm saying. Like if they have to take your kid to school every day, I mean, maybe not all of us are doing that right now, but some people are, taking your kid to school every day, even those 15 minutes, 20 minutes on the way there, on the way back, they're listening to a podcast. And I think that's important to remember is we're not having as much downtime. I know people that listen to podcasts in the shower, people that listen to podcasts just at any time when they find, okay, I'm going to have 15 minutes, I'm going to have 30 minutes, to myself, or I'm going to go listen to something. And so I think that really speaks to that affluent customer as well. There are people that are just consistently wanting to learn, trying to do better, and how to maximize their time.
That's awesome. So keep us on a roll. What are the next 2 or 3 things in that kind of publicity mindset that we can go with?
So the other thing that, oftentimes I think people think is really hard to do, but truly once you understand it isn't, is writing guest posts for online publications. So every virtually online publication you can imagine from entrepreneur all the way down to like Mind Body Green, all the way down to, really honestly, whatever you can think of, they all, for the most part, accept guest submissions. And so this is something that I really recommend people do, entrepreneurs do, business owners do, is find a publication that you think has an audience that would be a good fit for you. Like for me personally, a pitch that I'm working on right now is for a website called Growth Lab. And it's full of online entrepreneurs. It's a great fit for me. So I'm developing a pitch right now about, okay, what are the things that, I'm thinking, what are the things that online entrepreneurs can do to get over the fear of pitching themselves to the media? Okay, because that's a real thing. People definitely get nervous before they do that sometimes. So what are the kind of ways that we can break that down? And so I'm going to submit that pitch to Growth Lab here, probably in the next week or so. And if they decide that they want to accept that, then I'll go ahead and write a story for them, write a post for them that they will then put up on their website. And kind of the beauty of doing the guest post is that it's super easy to share. You can share that on your e-newsletter. You can easily share that in your on your website, all that good stuff. It ups your SEO because you're backlinking to a really awesome publication. Hey, if I get featured in Growth Lab, like you better believe I'm going to be backlinking that wherever I can to my website. And the other really nice thing about doing online publications is there's virtually no limit as to how many guest posts they'll accept because the internet just keeps going. The one thing about podcasts is like for most podcasters, they do one a week. So that means there's 52 opportunities throughout the year for you to get on their podcast, which is great. But sometimes for some of them, they're backed up half a year already. right? And that's fine. You still want to do that. Hey, if they want to take you and that's 6 months down the road, do it. Trust me. But the nice thing about guest posting is that there's really no limit to that, right? Like they can put up an article whenever they want. So that's a really nice thing about, excuse me, a really nice thing about doing the guest posts.
So this is so funny. A bunch of the people that we've been speaking to, whether it's in traditional marketing or whether it's in, you know, management or whatnot, has this idea just keeps coming up about, you know, repurposing content, right?
Yes.
So it's like, if you do a podcast for $20 on Fiverr, you can have somebody, you know, splice it out and then you can have them transcribe it for you. As you were talking through that idea of guest posting, I wrote this book, Lead Gen, 61 Days to Double Your Pay.
Yeah.
There's 61 chapters in here, not surprisingly, that are all like two or three pages. That's like perfect article size. Like, why do I not have my virtual assistant just submitting, you know, snippets of that article to everybody under the sun? And then one day, who knows, maybe Entrepreneur Magazine says, oh yeah, we need that piece on lead generation. Go into their archives, find Scott's stuff. Like, that just seems like a no-brainer. So far, everything you're saying is absolutely a no-brainer, and I'm just not doing it. Nor is anybody else watching this podcast. So keep going. So we got podcasts, we've got guest articles. What else do you love?
Yes. The third thing that, you know, I would really recommend doing is signing up for reactive media opportunities. So I don't know if you've ever heard of a website called Harrow, which is Help a Reporter Out. I think the actual website is helpareporter.com. But essentially, a lot of people don't realize that the media is looking for sources every single day. Okay. So if you think about the media, they're writing stories 24/7. They need to be getting quotes from people. They need to be getting ideas from people, just like you said with your different chapters that you have. And so every single day through Help a Reporter, which is free, by the way, helpareporter.com, you will get emails that are like, Inc. Magazine is looking for someone to speak on top lead generation tips. You know, Health Blog is looking for best morning smoothie recipes. Okay, so, and this will be, I mean, it's a long list. Like, there's a lot of different things and they're broken out into categories. But my point being that all these opportunities come through every single day. And it might not be that there's a good fit for you every single day, but you can look through them, see if there is. If there is, then you can shoot off a quick response. Hey, I've got some tips on lead gen. Here's one that I, you know, right off the bat. Let me know if you want to hear more, you know, or whatever. Okay. So thanks, Scott. And that's it. Okay. So that is something that I really think people should be doing more and more. They are every day looking for people that speak about business, everyday people that speak about real estate. And actually a really great one that I just discovered about a month ago is called Quoted. And that's QWOTED.com, also free. And they have a lot of things that have to do with real estate and finances. That's what they're looking for quotes for a lot. Or information for a lot. So that would be a really great opportunity for your audience to just get those emails, look through them quickly. You can have a assistant look through them. You know, it doesn't have to be you necessarily that looks through them. And if something pops up, be like, oh, yes, I could totally answer this. My only word of advice is don't spend an hour replying.
Right.
Okay. Spend 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And the reason for that is this is a quick reactive response. They're not expecting a full pitch. They're just expecting you to answer the question, whatever it is that they're looking for. And then the other thing is they're going to get quite a few responses. So don't spend too much time. And that's not to say that it doesn't happen. I've gotten coverage in big publications through these opportunities, but so I'm not just saying don't do it, but I'm saying they're going to get a lot. So don't spend an hour writing out this response,
5 minutes,
worrying about it.
My quick take.
Exactly. Here's my quick take. Thank you.
So as you were explaining this, I had to laugh because the founder of Harrow, Help a Reporter Out, is Peter Shankman.
Yes.
He and I met about 7 years ago and became friends. And then we argued so much about politics and everything else online because we're just very comfortable with that. I haven't heard from him in a while. I don't know if that's by design by him or he's just been very busy because he's like losing weight and running marathons and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. But he's a super good guy and
he's a smart guy.
Brilliant
in the marketing. Yeah, smart guy for setting up this service that now is used by so many people throughout the world. The one other word of advice I'll give about Haro, and that's why I think quoted might be a better spot if you're just starting out with reactive media queries. Haro, you get 3 emails a day. So that is one thing to keep in mind, because it can get really overwhelming for people. Because what good is it if you're not even opening the emails, right? So what I kind of always say is, especially if you have an assistant or yourself, set aside 15 minutes each day at whatever time you want it to be. Look at the queries from the past 24 hours, just scan through them, see if anything looks good, and then hit a reply if it does. That's kind of what I recommend. Don't try and look at each one as it comes in. Just do it one time a day, 10, 15 minutes, looking through, seeing if anything is worth your time.
Cool. And then give us one last resource before you tell us what you do for clients.
Yeah, I mean, I think that another great resource, and you kind of touched on this, is your local news. I think that so many people overlook their local news channels, and I think that that's a mistake. Even if you're looking for clients that are outside of your immediate area, right? Like if you're like, oh, but I'm based online, so I don't really necessarily need clients that are in Boise, right? Like for me, where I live, right? But the fact of the matter is, that's all validation. That's all building my credibility. So even if I maybe don't get a customer, like I don't see money come in the door from having been a guest expert on my local news station, that is still something that I can put on my website, that I have been featured in KGW Channel 8 News, right? That's still something that's building that credibility. And the other fact of the matter is, you never know. I've done things before, and especially when I was focused on tourism, people would send that to their friends or family that they knew worked for, a city doing tourism. And then I'd have people reach out to me, hey, I saw you in this clip. That's really cool, da, da, da. Okay. So there's absolutely value in that. And kind of the way to do that, the way I recommend, is calling the newsroom, asking who is the best person to, who's the story manager, who's the best person for you to pitch stories to. And that might be a producer of some sort. Get their email address. Don't try to talk to them right then. Just get their email address. Get that, shoot them an email, bullet point out a few things that you could talk about, a few topics that you could talk about that would be of value to the audience, and follow up with a call a few days later if you haven't heard anything. That's what I recommend. It's really the only time I recommend calling is your local news stations. And it's if you haven't heard back and you've already sent something. And I typically just follow up saying, hey, I shot you an email. Just want to make sure you received it. If you didn't, I'm happy to resend. And I can't even tell you how many times, I'd probably say half the time, they forgot completely that I'd sent that email. But by me just being very polite and following up, we actually end up getting the coverage, or they actually end up responding. So that's something I definitely recommend.
That's so cool. I've got another success story of somebody who's done this amazingly. A client of mine, her name is Kelly Chang. She's a lawyer here in LA, and she did exactly what you said. She's like, yeah. Hey, if there's ever a high profile divorce that you want me to talk about, this is my area of expertise. Yes. And then what's amazing is that, she went from like Pasadena public access to this. And now she's one of the go-to people on TMZ. If, all of a sudden it's announced that Angelina Jolie's getting divorced, it's okay. Yeah. That's who you talk to now. You call Kelly Chang.
Kelly. I love that.
And she's crushing. She's just absolutely crushing life. And, because she's my client, there's some things I can't talk about on how successful she's doing, but let's just say she's very, very successful, and she has to do almost no marketing because the publicity is totally taking care of it for her.
100%. And I bet her rates have just skyrocketed since she's been doing more publicity. The more people want you,
I would guess.
The more, I would guess, wink, that's probably been the case, which is amazing. Good for her.
Absolutely amazing. I'm just looking at a couple of the comments here, and I know a few people have chimed in with questions. And actually, the guy that I just started working out with, he has a jiu-jitsu gym here in Santa Clarita, which of course he can't open right now because gyms aren't allowed to be open. And what he's thinking is, how can I present myself as the expert in the space of physical fitness, martial arts as a way to improve your mind and your body, so that by the time he can reopen the gym, he's just got a huge mailing list of potential clients. So,
Yes.
I mean, obviously what you're talking about is, podcasts, local news and stuff, but if he needs to go even more super, super hyper local, because there's, 8 mixed martial arts gyms up here. So maybe he's really only attracting people that live within 15 or 20 square blocks, and he'll have a couple raving fans that will drive 20 minutes to come to his gym and pass 20 gyms on the way. But if you wanted to go hyper local and you're like, I'm a realtor, I'm a gym owner, I'm a bar, I want to get publicity in my neighborhood, in my little fiefdom. Do you have maybe a last tip for these people?
First of all, I'm only going to call my neighborhood my fiefdom from now on, because that is basically the greatest term ever. I would say, I'm going to wear a crown. It's going to be a whole thing. I would say that, I will preface this by saying that's not really my area of expertise, but what I would recommend doing is that local news, which I know we talked about, but really, hammering that, making sure that you're the expert. I actually think, and I realize that this is karate and not jujitsu, and I know that they're different, but Cobra Kai is crazy popular right now on Netflix. So I would totally tie something in with that, with your local news, pitching yourself maybe to a podcast that's local to your area. There are a lot of those. You can search podcasts and just put in the city that you live in, and there's definitely going to be some. And be like, hey, with everybody watching Cobra Kai right now, really loving it, here are some ways that you can start doing some martial arts work at home. Here are a few exercises that you could be doing. And the really cool thing about the local news too is the news is great, but I would also pitch your local newspaper. And I would pitch them with maybe a column idea, a few exercise ideas. But what I would, to take it a step further, offer to do a video of the exercises for them to post on their website, for their, followers, for people that have subscriptions or not, whatever, however they work it, whether they have a firewall or not. But I would just take that a step further. And I actually think that, again, I know they're different, but I do think that that would be a really cool tie-in, because Cobra Kai is just, it's like the number, I don't know, 2 or 3 thing on Netflix right now. So people are clearly in that mindset.
That's awesome. That's some great ideas. All right. So pitch us on what you do, right? Like, because there's nobody that I would have on this show who I wouldn't hire myself. So tell us what you do. If you want to go into cost, fee, services, consult, like, how do people get in touch with you? They're like, oh yeah, publicity is missing from some of my game.
Yes. And I hear that so often. Truly, people are like, I should be doing all this stuff, and they understand that and they get it, but it's just hard. And so my big thing, what I strive to do, is to take people from best kept secret to the go-to expert in their niche. And I do that through all this publicity work. And for me, I focus a lot on getting people on podcasts. That's something that I truly enjoy. I love doing it. I love being a guest on podcasts. I love helping other people get on podcasts to get in front of more of their ideal customers. So that's something I love doing. I do that privately for clients. My rates are very affordable, if I do say so myself. It is just, I'll be flat out honest with it. It's $4.97 a month to work with me pitching you for podcasts. And I guarantee that I'll get you on 2 podcasts each month, so that are a fit for your ideal customer. I'm not trying to just get you on a podcast to get you on a podcast. I want to get you on a podcast that gets you out in front of the right people.
But if it was me, since I'm super, super polished, you could get me on like 4, right? Or 8.
Oh, like, I mean, probably like 100.
Yeah,
I don't
like
know.
100.
We'll just like, you'd be like, that's 1,200. That's nothing.
$4 a podcast. It's fine. We're good.
Yeah, we're good. We're good here. No, and honestly though, you having your own podcast or having your own show, that is a huge plus for a lot of people, because then they know that you have done it. Like, that they know that you're comfortable speaking in this way, kind of having this recorded conversation. But with that being said, that's all a podcast is. It's a recorded conversation. And that's the thing that I always like to tell my clients when they get worked up about stuff, is like, you're just having a chat. Like, that's really what it is. It happens to be that other people are listening in. Someone's just eavesdropping, on the conversation that you're having. It's fine. But that's a big thing that I do. So I do pitching for clients. That's something that I absolutely love doing. And then I also have a brand new checklist that's out today called the Podcast Pitch Checklist. And I'll make sure you guys get the link for that. I think it's basically publicityxchristina.com/podcast pitch checklist.
Cool.
But I'll make sure you have that. And that is for people that want to do it themselves. So if you've been listening to me and you're like, yes, I have got to do this. I have got to get on it. This is awesome. This is a checklist that's going to take you through, kind of the steps that you need to do to send your first pitch and what to do right after.
Got it.
So once you get the yes, and that leads up to me having my first live masterclass series that's going to be starting in October. It's going to be 7 weeks of me doing live training. So just once a week for an hour to 90 minutes each week with Q&A, it'll have Q&A in there of me literally teaching you exactly how to start pitching yourself for podcasts. It's also something that VAs can take, something that assistants can take to start doing that work as well. And it includes me personally reviewing your media bio, your first pitch. You get a lot of interaction with me in that while I'm giving my feedback.
I feel like that's something I could send my virtual assistant to and just be like, hey, Christina's going to give you the playbook and then you hammer away at this 2 hours a day. You review Haro and Quoted and send out 8 solicitations a day to various podcasts. And, eventually we'll be on some little podcast that has 100 viewers, maybe. But you do enough of those, one of those guys ends up becoming the next Joe Rogan, right? And then it's like, oh, sweet. I'm friends and an early adopter of the next Joe Rogan.
Absolutely. And on the flip side of that, the people that come over to your list, they really like you. They know, like, and even you being on that guest, you being on that is great. But the people that come to your list, like, they feel like there's some kind of connection that they feel right with you, which means that they're going to be much more apt to listen to what you actually have to say moving forward. And that's kind of the big thing I always preach is like, look, I love getting any kind of lead that I get, but a warm lead is obviously always going to convert better than bringing in a cold lead. And that's the beauty of podcasts. And kind of the thing that in my course, in my masterclass series that I want to teach is how to move forward doing this for like 3 hours a week so that you're continually, upping that game, continually upping yourself, giving yourself publicity, that type of thing, but it's not taking up all of your time. Right.
Cool. Any last thought you have to leave us with? Is there anything I forgot to ask you about publicity that everybody needs to know?
It's okay. I'm like, maybe I need another coffee. I don't know, like a few of my words of just like, So, no, I honestly think that we covered most of it. The main thing I want everyone to know is that you can do it. Like, you can do it. It is something that is really, honestly, quite formulaic once you understand how to do it. And so that's the important thing about publicity is like, you got this. Don't let that imposter syndrome come in and make you feel like you're not a big deal. You're not enough of an expert. You're not who should be talking about this stuff. I guarantee you are. And I guarantee that there are places that you can find coverage.
That's awesome. Well, Christina, one, I know your time is super valuable because you frequently bill by the hour, and and I know you're trying to keep your family safe and healthy up there in Boise with all the smoke. So thanks for taking time out of your day.
Thank you.
We put in the comments here all the ways to get in touch with you. Later on when this is on the show notes and YouTube and all that fun stuff, we'll also link to you and hopefully you get some clients out of it because it's very obvious to me that you know exactly what you're talking about.
I hope so. And I would love that. I truly, even just hopping on a discovery call, I'll have that link be available for you guys as well. I do a 15-minute call just so we can discuss if publicity is a good fit for you and where you are right now.
Cool. All right. I'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye.